But I believe, on behalf of the innocent victims in history, that the scales of justice should work out. And if they don't, life is radically unjust. The law of the jungle prevails.
Okay, well, I'm just going to go to our next question, which we can respond to some of these issues through that. It's a video question. It comes from Nick Walsh in Nyngan, New South Wales.
How can there be a compassionate God who is all-powerful and has created us, yet we suffer? Why create such a world in the first place?
Richard Dawkins, you can reflect on that and the previous question.
Well, it's hardly my business to say how could a compassionate God like that exist. Darwin himself said it was impossible for him to believe in a God who was capable of creating such suffering. He actually was talking about suffering in the animal kingdom.
Do you assume that suffering is a natural part of the human condition?
It's a natural part of the living condition. It's a natural part of Darwinian natural selection, which is one of the reasons why I was so keen to say that I didn't want to live by Darwinian principles. There is massive amount of suffering in the natural world, a huge amount of suffering, and it seems to me that's an almost inevitable consequence of Darwinian natural selection. I'm more interested, however, in what's true than in what I would like to be true. It would be very nice if there were no suffering in the world. It would be very nice if there were a sort of natural scale of justice, as the Cardinal was saying. But I'm more interested in what's true. So it's not the business of an atheist to justify the ways of God to man. It is the business of a cardinal.
OK, let's go to the Cardinal. The question was, how can there be a compassionate God who's all-powerful and has created us and yet we suffer? Why create such a world in the first place?
I think that's probably the hardest question for us to answer.
Do you struggle with it?
Yes. If I get a chance to say, to ask a question when I die, I think I'll ask the good God, why is there so much suffering? That's a problem for us. I think the greater problem and I'll come back to the question because it's a very good one. That's the heart of what we're about. I think it's a much greater problem for the atheist to explain why there is goodness and truth and beauty. Our problem is to cope with suffering. Now, one of the unique, I think, well, certainly special features of Christian teaching is the value of redemptive suffering. And that is the significance of Christ suffering with us and dying on the cross. And that helps people. My first Easter after I was a priest, it was in the hills in Italy. Very sad village. All the men were away in Germany or Switzerland getting big money, home only for 3 weeks a year. And people were coming to confession, coming for consolation. I was even wetter behind the ears than I am now. I didn't know what to say. And eventually I said to someone, well, look, Christ suffered too. Christ had a bad run. Christ died on the cross, and we believe that through his suffering, good will eventually triumph.
Can I take it to a bigger level than that village, to the Holocaust, to genocide, to famine? If there is an omnipotent and all-powerful God, why does he let these things happen?
That's a very good question, but if God is going to allow us to be good, he's got to give us freedom. There's no alternative to that.
But he chose to intervene at different times in history to save the Jews when they were going over the river Jordan. I mean, there are many times when apparently God has intervened in biblical times. Why not now?
Well, that's, I think Revelation is complete. That's a mighty question. He helped probably through secondary causes for the Jews to escape and continue. It's interesting, through these secondary causes, probably no people in history have been punished the way the Germans were. It's a terrible mystery.
Well, I think there'd be a very strong argument saying that the Jews of Europe suffered worse than the Germans.
Yes, that might be right. Certainly, the suffering in both. I mean, the Jews, there was no reason why they should suffer.
Okay, I'm just going to. We're running out of time. I'm going to go to another question. It's on a different subject from Anita Wu.
Jesus preaches, love thy neighbour as thyself. So Cardinal Pell, how can you be against giving our gay neighbours marriage rights when equality and respect are the fundamental foundations of loving and spreading love?
Well, it's quite misleading and quite unfair to suggest that Christians hate homosexuals. Christians love everybody. We believe that marriage is between a man and a woman, that it is for the continuity of the human race. We believe that men and women are made for one another spiritually, psychologically, physically. We believe that a man and a woman as a father with their children is far and away the best and most efficient and most economical system to bring up children, and governments should support it. For a homosexual couple to have a union, well and good. There's no reason why that can't be.
Can I just interpose a quick question on this? We are running out of time. I mean, do you believe that homosexuality, since it's not a question of choice, is part of God's natural order?
Oh, creation's messy. I think it's the Oriental carpet makers always leave a little flaw in their carpet because only God's perfect.
But you're suggesting that homosexuals are flawed human beings?
Not necessarily. But what I am saying is I don't think homosexual activity is simply the result of genetic makeup, because we are free. We can control our instincts, and like with heredity and environment, a lot of this practice is learned. But whatever about it, we've got to try to support these people, show compassion. The Catholic Church has a great record there. We look after more HIV sufferers than any other non-government organisation, but we don't believe it's possible to have homosexual marriage.
I'm going to, we're almost out of time. We've got time for one more question that both of our guests can answer. It's from Catherine Shen.
As an atheist, Professor Dawkins, do you believe that believing in God for emotional support should be allowed even temporarily? Research has proven that people who believe in God has a better chance of surviving terminal illnesses such as cancer, as well as living longer when they go to church. So do you think that believing in God is beneficial for our well-being, even if God is an illusion?
It's perfectly possible that, as you say, believing in God has beneficial effects upon health. It's possible that you're less likely to suffer a duodenal ulcer or something of that sort. But I do have to stress, I mean, that's an utterly trivial argument compared to the truth of whether the God actually exists or not. I mean, that's a really big question. It's an important question, one that the Cardinal and I would agree on. And if there is some minor benefit to health one way or the other, the evidence is not good, by the way, but even bending over backwards to suggest that the evidence is there, that psychosomatic illness may be healed, may be alleviated somewhat by belief in God. Psychosomatic medicine is well known. Placebos work. If God is simply a placebo, that's fine. But I'm interested in whether he's actually there.
Okay, Cardinal Pell, final word, actually.
Yeah, so am I. It's a question of truth. Christians don't present God as like Santa Claus, something that a myth that's useful for children. And believing in God and being a Christian cuts both ways. More people were killed for their Christian belief in the last century than any other century, probably than all the other centuries combined. They died on principle to be faithful to Jesus. So we might get some benefits. We mightn't get ulcers. We might live a bit longer. That might have much more to do with our heredity. But we follow Christ because we believe it's the truth. I think it does bring a peace of mind. It does help us. But sometimes it gets us into... my life would be much simpler and much easier if I didn't have to go to bat for a number of Christian principles.
Have you ever regretted that you do?
Sometimes I wonder.
Seriously?
No.
Okay, that's all we have time for tonight. Before we go, let's check the final results of tonight's Quanda vote. With more than 20,000 of you voting, we have a 76% saying no. Religious belief does not make the world a better place. Please thank our special guests, Professor Richard Dawkins and Cardinal George Pell. And next week on Q&A, we return to worldly matters with Attorney General Nicola Roxon, the manager of opposition business Christopher Pyne, international human rights lawyer Jeffrey Robertson, humanist, philosopher A.C. Grayling, and Middle East analyst Lydia Khalil. Until then, good night.